Novel Navigator. Chapter 71, Crimson Hound. We should get going, Ron said to Adam. I can take you where Crimson Hounds are. This city is quite a maze, you might get lost. Sure. Adam nodded. At that moment, they heard a voice. Hey, wait a moment. The arch-warrior came rushing down the stairs and bore a giant smile on his face. Sorry for my previous behavior, but I didn't expect you to be the one. Ron narrowed his eyes and asked, What do you want? Calm down, Granger. The arch-warrior said with an arrogant chuckle and patted Ron's shoulder. I just want to talk to this little guy. I have an offer for him. Ron narrowed his eyes, but stepped back and crossed his arms while having a clear idea of what the arch-warrior was planning to do. The arch-warrior took a small card from his pocket and handed it over to Adam. Adam checked out the mercenary card and raised his eyebrow. Name, Chris Raven. Level, Hidden. Affiliation, Dungeon Slayers. Recruit, B. Rank, Arch-warrior. Dungeon Slayers. Adam recognized that name. I am part of Dungeon Slayers, it's a Tier 2 guild. Chris said proudly. As far as I am aware, our guild master sent an invitation to you. I am not sure whether you accepted or not, but we can talk about some details if you are interested. Some of the new recruits looked envious. They would be lucky enough to join the Tier 4 guild, let alone Tier 2. Now, this arrogant man was personally inviting Adam to join such a powerful guild. I am interested. Adam said and asked, I might already know, but what does your guild mainly do? Chris grinned and said, we're mostly in the dungeons, just like you expected, slaying chaos beings. We're a very action-heavy guild, and we spend more time in dungeons than anywhere else. They're adrenaline junkies. Ron said coldly. That's why Dungeon Slayers are recruiting quite often because so many of their members die. I don't like your tongue, Granger. Chris replied with a sharp glare. The weak die. That's how it's always been, everywhere in the New World. Only the strong survive in the dungeon. If you survive there, you can survive anywhere. Adam handed his mercenary card back and thought about Chris' words. It was quite a risky lifestyle, but it was one of the fastest ways to grow stronger. If I focused on killing chaos beings and just spent all my time in dungeons, I am sure I could reach grandeur in a year. It's extremely risky. Also, I don't want to focus all my time on increasing my level. There are other methods of strength as well, such as learning Kiryoku, craft, and magic, then some skills. While our home is somewhat Dawnwatch, as it is where our headquarters are, we are actually living on the 21st floor of the dungeon. Chris said. 21st floor's respawn crystal has also been destroyed. Adam thought. That floor is now fully in the control of humanity, and it has been built into the only human settlement beyond the 5th floor. So, what do you say? Chris asked with a confident smirk. Since you're an S-ranker and all, you'll get some special benefits and protection. With us, you'll become strong real quick. Sounds interesting and all, but I have to decline. Adam said with a calm look. I am not that much in a hurry to become strong. Chris frowned and said, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Don't be a fool. Ron smiled at Adam's answer and said, actually, we're in somewhat of a hurry. Digby Chaucer is waiting for us. Adam chuckled silently. Digby is. Chris' eyes widened. Digby Chaucer was one of the strongest people in Dawnwatch. This city didn't have any Tier 1 or Tier 0 guilds, as all of those were located in Imperium City. Therefore, Prime Mercenary had the highest rank in Dawnwatch, with Digby being at the peak of Prime Mercenary, a small leap away from reaching Royal Prince. So, you're joining them? Chris scoffed, clearly annoyed by the rejection, and then stormed off the Mercenary Guild. Digby isn't actually waiting for us, is he? Adam said with a chuckle. He wouldn't have allowed you to reject otherwise. Ron said with a smirk. He is able to act however he wants in front of us, as he is stronger, but compared to Digby, he is nothing. There's always a bigger fish somewhere. The banner of the crimson-furred dog flapped in the wind, a symbol of strength and dominance. The sky had turned grey, as if it were about to rain, and the air was getting colder. Some dark clouds moved over Dawnwatch Mountain, casting ominous shadows over the land. This is the place. Ron, with Adam by his side, walked down a one-way street and arrived at the front gates of a large villa. Adam pulled out the invitation letter from his inventory and looked at it intensely. He was thinking about whether this was the correct decision. I am always nervous when making a life-changing decision. Adam sighed. However, I think this is the correct decision. Another reason why I declined Dungeon Slayer's invitation was because they would get destroyed in the following year in a guild war. Crimson Hounds, on the other hand, were never in any major fight. There was the thing with the Amarin brothers, but they still survived through that. I hope the fate of this guild doesn't change because of me. This is our farewell for now. Ron offered a handshake, and after they shook hands, he looked at the gate and said, I think you're making a correct decision. Digby is powerful and influential. Adam nodded. After Ron patted his shoulders, he slipped his hands inside his pockets and started walking away. And just like this, Ron's job as tutorial caretaker had come to an end. It was supposed to be a 1-month-long job, and it was supposed to be a rather well-paid job that was going to be boring, but in the end, it turned out to be a very historic one. Adam approached the front gates and knocked on them twice. He then waited, and after a short while, the gates were opened slowly by 2 well-armored guards. They had silver armor with a crimson cape billowing behind them. It was billowing quite grandly as the wind started picking up. It was clear that it was about to start raining soon. Who are you, and what do you want? The guards asked, their voices gruff and authoritative. I got invited to the guild. Adam handed over the letter. The guards exchanged gazes. They weren't aware that their guild master was recruiting. They then checked the letter's envelope, and it had Digby's signature and official guild seal. We hadn't received any news that our guild master was recruiting. The guard said. If you don't mind, my friend here will come talk to Sir Digby personally while you wait here. I am fine with that. Adam said and gazed at the darkening sky. I hope they do it soon. It is about to rain. The other guard entered the villa and went to fetch the guild master. What's your name, if I may ask? The guard asked with a rough voice. It's Adam Palestar. Adam nodded respectfully. Nice to meet you, sir. Adam. Palestar. The guard's eyes slowly widened, and his sword clattered to the ground in shock. Chapter 72, Request. Drip, drip. The rain started to slowly fall, tapping against the window with a calming rhythm. At the villa's cozy-looking office, which also acted as a small library, Digby read through a mystery novel with a cup of tea in hand. As he took another sip, suddenly a knock resonated throughout the room. Come in. Digby said loudly, closed the novel, and put the cup of tea down on the desk. The door opened, and a well-armored guard entered the office with a low bow. Digby's eyebrow rose. You're on guard duty, are you not? Did something happen? We have a person on the front gate that claims he received an invitation letter. The guard said. An invitation letter? Digby frowned. In the past few months, I have only sent one letter. His eyes slowly began to widen, but he then shook his head, thinking that it wasn't possible. Did you get the person's name? The guard looked awkward and scratched his head. I forgot to ask. That's fine. Digby stood up, fixing his jacket. I'll go. The guard nodded, and then, with Digby, they left the office and walked down the hallways until they arrived at the front yard. There, they saw a guard standing awkwardly with a young man standing under a small tree that was planted in the yard, trying to shelter himself from the rain. Guildmaster. The guard, who waited with Adam, bowed respectfully. Digby roughly nodded and turned to Adam, looking curious. May I see the letter? I don't recall sending any invitation letters. Of course. Adam pulled it out of his pocket and handed it over to the red-haired guildmaster of Crimson Hound mercenaries. Digby removed the envelope, which had been previously ripped open, and started reading through the letter. His eyes looked baffled, as if he couldn't believe what he was reading. May I see your mercenary card? Digby's heartbeat started rising, and he pocketed the letter. It's not that I don't believe your identity, but that's not a problem. Adam pulled out his mercenary card and handed it over to him. Digby checked it out and saw the S letter adorning the recruit spot. Adam Palestar, the newly crowned S ranker. Digby gave him the card back and felt the rain fall on his head. Can we continue this talk indoors? Hearing that name, the second guard's eyes widened in shock, and he turned to his friend. His friend shrugged his shoulders, equally surprised. Adam nodded and followed after Digby, while the two guards stayed outdoors as their duty was to guard the gate. It didn't matter whether it was sunny or rainy. While walking down the hallways, Adam saw that the villa was shaped like a square with a large central yard. The central yard was used for some outdoor training, and currently, it was used by some mercenaries even though it rained. Around the central yard, there were countless different rooms, some were rooms for mercenaries, and a few were dojos or martial arts practice. Digby and Adam left the central courtyard, walked down another hallway that went for about 20 meters, and arrived at the cozy-looking office. Digby took a seat behind the desk, and Adam stayed standing, as his status wasn't high enough to sit in the same room as Prime Mercenary Digby. This feels weird. Adam thought to himself. He had forgotten how it was to be the one standing. He was the one sitting down, while others had to stand up and treat him with the utmost respect. Oh, he knows to respect the hierarchy. Digby looked impressed, as new recruits always have a hard time getting used to it. Why did you want to join us? Digby asked with a frown. I know you, as a S-rank recruit, must have received hundreds of invitations. Out of all of them, you chose my guild. Why? First of all, I didn't want to go to Imperium City. Adam said, I would be the weakest person there, and I feel like I would have been trapped there. I like some freedom. Digby nodded, feeling like that was a fair thought to have. Every other S-ranker went to Imperium City, as it was the place to gain the most strength in the fastest way. This made Adam very unique as an S-ranker. Second, I wanted to be part of a guild that is fairly strong and not weak. Adam said. This, as Tier 2 guild, fits the criteria well. Honestly, this guild is barely Tier 2. Digby said, not sugarcoating it. If I was barely weaker, we would drop to Tier 3. There are stronger Tier 2 guilds out there. He is unlike others, who are trying to paint a beautiful picture of their guild. Adam thought. He is saying the truth. I also heard that you're a great man. Adam said with his arms crossed. Also, I believe that you can give me the protection I need. As you must know, some people will target me. Protection, you say? Digby leaned on the chair and looked intently at Adam. Sure, I am one of the strongest people in Dawnwatch, but I am only one person. Your strength isn't only physical. Adam said. You're the son of Samuel Chaucer, are you not? How did you know? Digby's frown loosened, and he stared at Adam in surprise. I see, you are betting that no one will attack us because of my lineage. I am hoping so, at least. My father is old. Digby said solemnly. One day, he will quit this game and what then? I have some enemies, YC. By then, I believe I can protect myself. Adam said and then bowed respectfully. Please, let me join. You won't regret it. Digby stood up from his chair and walked over to the window, watching as rain poured down from the dark clouds above. Crimson Hound's new generation isn't looking that strong, Digby said with a heavy voice. Nas is looking promising, but others are not so much. I also believe that you won't stay with us forever, isn't that right? Adam nodded and said, I appreciate the opportunity to learn from you and grow, but I also have my own path to follow. Haha. Digby laughed and scratched his scarred cheek. I like your honesty. To be honest, I just sent the invitation letter out of courtesy. I never expected you to accept it. It brings some unwanted trouble to our guild, but I'm sure we can handle it. We. Adam raised his head with a smile. Welcome to Crimson Hounds. Digby turned to him and nodded. It's not every day you get to teach an S-ranker. Adam sighed in relief and nodded with a slight smile. Thank you, but I also have a favor to ask. Consider it an investment. What is it? Digby sat back down and crossed his legs. May I get $100,000 in advance? Adam said, a shocking request. Digby considered the request carefully before responding. You have financial troubles that might hinder your ability to log in constantly. That's right. Adam said. If I receive that, I don't ask for monthly pay for the following year. Monthly pay. Each mercenary received a pay once a month, depending on their rank. It was why some guilds couldn't just hire everyone they could get their hands on. The strong mercenaries cost too much for some smaller guilds to afford, so they had to carefully select who they hired. That's not needed. Digby waved his hand. You'll receive your monthly pay as well as this small investment. It is not a big request. Other S-rankers have made far more ridiculous requests, but they've also joined Tier 1 guilds, who can afford it. I appreciate it. Adam said with relief. And now I have enough money to pay off the year's rent in advance and also have money left to purchase a new VR pod. This bronze VR pod limits my abilities far too much. Chapter 73, Shadow League. This'll be your room. Digby flicked a switch, and a small flicker of light appeared from the ceiling that fell over the room. There wasn't any electricity in the world, and instead there was something called magic energy. It came from small shards found in the dungeons that basically worked as electricity. It allowed the people to still have proper light in their houses and make food on stoves. The room was rather simple, with a wooden bed in the corner, an empty bookshelf, a desk with a flickering candle on top, and a chair pulled up to it. There will be a daily training session in the central courtyard's dojo. It will be indoors this time as it is raining. Digby said. You'll join other recruits. Some have already been with us for nearly a year, but they're still called recruits. All right. Adam entered the room with the backpack slung over his shoulder and dropped it on the chair. Also, you'll have a choice to make. Digby said with his arms crossed. You'll receive 3 choices. Craft, magic, or Kiryoku. Whichever you'll choose, you get the scroll and instructions on how to learn that particular skill. You aren't allowed to choose more than one. Even though you're a S-ranker, one of the 3 powers already takes years to master. Even learning its base form is difficult. I see, thank you. Adam nodded, but he had already made his decision of which he would learn first. Also, give me your card. Digby said while pulling out his own mercenary card. Adam handed it over to him, and Digby touched the card with his own card. Something changed in Adam's card as it let out a soft glow. Then he gave the card back. Now, it shows that your affiliation is with Crimson Hound Mercenaries. Digby said. You're now officially part of us. Since you already gave your bank details, you'll receive your investment money in your account within 12 hours. Thank you. Adam breathed a sigh of relief and bowed respectfully. You'll hear a voice, a shouting voice, from one of my mercenaries. Whenever you do, go straight to the dojo and don't be late. You're a S-ranker, but we also don't allow you to laze around. All right. Adam nodded. With that, Digby left the room and closed the sliding door behind him. Ah! Adam rubbed the back of his head and laid down on his bed. His muscles were extremely tense, and he could feel the exhaustion settling in. It was not easy to be in the same room as someone as powerful as Digby. His aura was overwhelming for someone like Adam, who was only mercenaryman. The first part of my plan has gone smoothly, Adam said with a fatigued look. Now, it is time to become stronger. Digby walked down a hallway with a powerful posture and long strides. All the servants and mercenaries bowed at the sight of him, showcasing their undying loyalty and respect. Digby. Valera rushed from the end of the hallway and asked, "Is it true?" "You already heard," Digby said casually. "Those guards. After I returned, the guards told me," Valera said anxiously. "S-Ranker joined us." "Yes." Digby nodded. "I already made him part of our guild." Valera quieted down, barely able to comprehend it. It was truly shocking news. Out of nearly 1,000 guilds, S-Ranker happened to join them. They were now the fourth guild in the world to have S-Rankers in their midst. King Moriarty, the guild leader of the Imperial Order. It was currently the strongest guild in the world. They were such a special guild that they weren't ranked as tiers anymore. They weren't even really considered a guild anymore, as their strength had reached such crazy levels. However, if there was a tier for them, it would be beyond tier O. Mauricio Slaughter was the guild master of death mercenaries. Saphira and Arxam Everhart joined one of the 7 ancient guilds, the Dying Star Guild, only recently. It was now considered one of the strongest guilds in the world. Calamity Black joined Death Mercenaries, the guild that was at the top of the Tier 1 rankings. It was only a matter of time before that guild, led by Mauricio, becomes part of the Tier O guilds and become 8 ancient guild. Adam Palestar had now joined Crimson Hound Mercenaries, the Tier 2 guild. It was such an odd choice for someone of S rank. "Don't fret over it," Digby said and patted her shoulder. Valera nodded, but she was still worried. "Is the training REA?" Digby's words got cut off suddenly as he sensed something strange. His brows furrowed. "What?" Valera turned to him and saw Digby's deep frown. "Is something wrong? Some pests are lurking around." Digby's eyes turned cold, and he then quickly jumped to the roof of the villa. He activated his Kiryoku and sensed every living being in the vicinity of the villa. At that moment, he sensed a few abnormalities. Those abnormal auras were currently running away. Crack! The roof cracked as Digby crouched and then leaped across the air. The rain continued to pour down heavily, but each raindrop disappeared as soon as it landed on his powerful body. Digby, while moving throughout the air, used his Kiryoku and then managed to sense one of the abnormalities. He saw a moving aura, hectically running down a narrow alleyway in the distance. Boom! At that moment, Digby crashed down the alleyway, breaking the pavement and shattering nearby windows. Ah! A black-clothed figure came to an instant stop, an ugly frown on his face. "He managed to sense me. Shadow League's rat!" Digby spat out, glaring at the figure with coldness. "Now that you know who I am part of, I can't leave you alive." The shadow figure screamed and summoned black bullets all around him. Black bullets! Then, those black bullets launched towards Digby, as if they were being fired from a machine gun. Digby's eyes glowed with a faint glow, and then, with minimalistic movements, he weaved through the bullets that moved at the speed of light. The bullets all missed. His level of Kiryoku is monstrous. The shadow figure's expression looked ugly, and then he jumped in the air and summoned a massive storm of darkness. Shadow Stow! Before he could shout out his skill's name, Digby vanished and appeared next to the shadow figure, his fist moving towards his face. The vambrace and the glove suddenly turned deep purple color. He coated his vambrace and the glove with craft. The shadow figure activated his Kiryoku and slowly dodged his head out of the way, but Digby's level of Kiryoku was higher, and his fist made contact with the shadow figure's face, knocking him to the ground. As his body crashed to the ground, the pavement shattered like glass, and the nearby buildings trembled as if there were an earthquake. At that moment, the shadow figure's body began to disintegrate into a cloud of black smoke, dissipating into the air. Soon, he was completely gone. Digby frowned, and he activated his Kiryoku to cover the entirety of Dawn Watch. However, the person was already gone. Shadow clones. Digby thought with a scoff. No wonder I couldn't sense them at first. Their auras were so faint and indistinguishable from the other auras in the vicinity. Digby, are you all right? Valera, with a dozen mercenaries in tow, appeared in the alleyway with their weapons drawn. They saw the aftermath of the fight, but the enemy seemed to be gone. I am fine, Digby said casually. Too bad, I wanted to hide the fact that Adam joined us for a little longer. I guess he was being unfortunately followed since the border town. Chapter 74, Worthless. New World, at a disclosed location. Ah! A black-eyed man opened his eyes to reveal a sinister look. How did it go? Other voices echoed in the room. The black-eyed man looked at the several people sitting in the same circle, cross-legged on a carpet with a flickering candle in the center. The shadow is dead. The black-eyed man said coldly. It took the mana of all 6 of us to create that one shadow, and now it's gone. Please tell us that you at least received some information we can sell. The new S-ranker is in Dawn Watch and has joined Crimson Hound mercenaries. Give him paper. A person on the circle said. Another person pulled out a piece of paper from his bag and slid it over to the black-eyed man. He also gave the black-eyed man a pen with ink on it. The black-eyed man concentrated and then started drawing a portrait. His skilled hands moved across the paper with ease, and soon a drawing that resembled a face bore a familiar resemblance emerged. After a short while, the black-eyed man did a final stroke. The drawing was finished. At the paper, a pale-skinned face with shoulder-length black hair and a subtle smile gazed back at them. He didn't look bad, and he had a certain amount of charm radiating from him. This is the person. The black-eyed man said. Adam Palestar, newly crowned S-ranker. This is good. The people echoed. Let's spread the news that we have information about him. I am sure other powers will soon know where he is and how he looks, but we have the lead for now. Dawn Watch, Crescent Serpents Guild building. Smack, smack, smack. The sound of a wooden sword striking a pole loudly echoed throughout the yard. In the small yard of Crescent Serpents building, which was located in guild grounds, mercenaries of varying ages trained tirelessly under the watchful eye of their experienced instructor. It didn't matter that the rain was pouring down in sheets. This was one of the practices of the Crescent Serpent Guild. In the dungeon, there were floors with much harsher weather. If they couldn't handle a single rainstorm, how would they ever survive the challenges that lay ahead in the dungeon? At one of the training poles, Ron hacked, slashed, and stabbed his wooden sword at the pole until his arms ached and his hands were covered in blisters. His clothes were drenched and clinging to his skin, with sweat mixing with rain. Hey, Ron! Ron stopped striking the pole and turned to see his friend calling out to him. His friend was sitting under the shelter of the porch, calling out to him. After putting his training sword away, Ron entered the shelter and received a towel from his friend, then started drying himself off. The guildmaster called out for you. His friend said with a smirk. I am sure he wants to know about your experiences in the tutorial. It was quite a special one, wasn't it? MMH. Ron nodded and put the towel away. Thanks for the towel. Is the guildmaster at his office? Before you leave, I have a question. His friend turned to him and grinned. Is this, Adam, really as monstrous as everyone says? After all, he defeated you, and I know how strong you are. I think everyone is still underestimating him. Ron said with a frown. Hey, what do you mean? His friend asked with a tilt of his head. Everyone has spoken highly of him. Humph. Ron shook his head. They don't know anything about him. Of course, since he is a S-ranker, everyone is thinking highly of him. However, I think his potential lies even beyond S-rank. His friend raised an eyebrow in confusion and watched as Ron walked away to go meet the guild master. Beyond S-rank. New Karma, Criminals Street. Smack, pow, boom. Ah! A young man fell to the ground with a bruised and swollen face. The sound of snickering and laughter echoed throughout the room like a song of mockery. At that moment, another young man slid backwards with his arms bruised. In front of him, a grinning mercenary threw blows with a malicious gleam in his eyes. The young man desperately tried to block them, but the mercenary's fist broke through his block and landed a solid punch on his gut, forcing him down on his knees. Arg! Ramon vomited his breakfast onto the ground. He was covered in blood and bruises, and his clothes were dirted and tattered. Beside him, his friend, Hannibal, barely managed to stay conscious. He lay flat on the ground, his eyes looked unfocused, his hair disheveled, and his face badly swollen, as if he were having an allergic reaction. Ha ha ha, so weak. The mercenary flexed his muscles while over a dozen other mercenaries laughed along with him while drinking and enjoying the show. At the end of the room, there was a high-end throne with a man sitting on it, observing the scene with a look of amusement. Behind the throne, on the wall, was a sign that said Necroman Guild. Tui. Ramon spat out blood from his mouth and stood up with his whole body shaking. His whole body was at a breaking point. HP, 7/500. Arg. He groaned and looked at the man at the throne with hatred in his eyes. Haha, I like the look in your eyes. Necroman grinned viciously, his face mostly covered by a dark hood. A look of hatred and deviance. Dangerous combo. Why are you doing this? Ramon asked through gritted teeth. We are of no threat. Exactly, that's the problem. Necroman laughed. You weaklings are eyesores. How unlucky of you fools to come to New Karma, the home city for pro-strong folks, haha. Pro-strong. Ramon's eyes widened in fear and shock. New Karma is the place with the highest number of crimes and slavery. Necroman laughed. Haha, no one mentioned that to you guys, didn't they? Too bad, they've sent you guys here to be slaves. NGH. Hannibal groaned in pain and sat back up, blood dripping off his face. Ramon, what if we just die? We'll get zeroed, but it doesn't matter as we are already at the bottom. We don't have to do the tutorial again either, we wouldn't lose anything except our weapons and shine coin. Ramon frowned, but was thinking about that possibility. They would respawn somewhere else and only have to avoid New Karma. Haha, do you fools think that works? Necroman leaned forward with a sinister gleam in his eyes. We'll only have to share the news that you two are Necroman's enemies. Necroman revealed 2 mercenary cards and grinned. We also have your two's names and faces already. There won't be a place that will accept you either. Good luck finding another tier 2 guild like us, especially after finding out that you two have already made enemies. And no tier 3 guild will accept you, as they're no match for us. There will be nowhere for you two to escape to, ha ha ha. We'll find you wherever you go. Why go to such lengths for us? Ramon asked with despair dripping from his voice. We are just 2 nobodies. Hannibal despaired with a defeated look. He didn't expect this to happen to them. He realized they both underestimated the new world. Hi 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 hi. Necroman giggled in a childish manner. I just love doing so. You two have 3 choices, become our slaves, kill yourself and try to hide from us, or just quit. This place isn't where weak-willed fools last long. Ramon. Hannibal whispered with a heavy look. Ramon gritted his teeth and looked at his friend. I am not going back to Asylum. I would rather die. We'll escape and try our luck. Hannibal asked. That would be worthless. Ramon looked towards the throne, then bowed low till his forehead touched the ground and said, Please, let us join. Our Ramon is actually pleading. Hannibal's eyes widened in shock, never expecting his friend to do that. Ramon had closed his eyes and was pressing his face against the floor so no one would be able to see his face. He was crying, tears streaming down his face. Necroman's grin widened to his ears, and he clearly enjoyed this pathetic display of weakness. Zip, a mercenary pulled down his zipper and started urinating on Ramon's head. That. Hannibal's eyes widened in fear. What about you, weakling? Nerkaman's dead-looking eyes landed on Hannibal. What's your choice? Hannibal's head slowly lowered towards the ground, and soon his forehead touched the floor. He never expected the two of them to plead to become slaves. At that moment, he felt warm liquid flow down his head as another mercenary started urinating on him. Hannibal gritted his teeth and side-eyed Ramon, wondering what his friend was thinking. At that moment, his breath almost stopped as he saw Ramon crying, but he also bit into his lip so hard that it was bleeding. I'll become strong, 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 strong. Ramon kept repeating the word strong to himself over and over again. This was the biggest humiliation of his entire life. Even when he was living in the streets among rats and garbage, he never felt this low. It was as if he wasn't even worthy of being called a human being anymore. Chapter 75, The Choice. Dawn Watch, Crimson Hound's Villa. Training in 5 in the indoor dojo. A voice echoed throughout the villa, bouncing off the stone walls and reaching every corner of the expansive estate. Adam's eyes opened, waking up from his meditative state. He was sitting cross-legged and had meditated for the past hour. He was hoping to get his emotions under control. Better hurry. Adam stood up, his legs feeling slightly numb, and then left his room and headed straight to the central courtyard. After arriving, he saw players opening a sliding door, bowing, and putting their shoes aside before entering the sacred ground. Adam followed suit, opened the sliding door, bowed in respect, and placed his shoes aside. Then, he entered the dojo in only his socks and saw rows of tatami mats covering the entire floor. The players stood up in rows, talking with their friends and stretching while waiting for their instructor to arrive. Adam joined the back row, feeling slightly like an outsider. Everyone clearly knew each other, but since he was the only new recruit, he felt a bit out of place. Oh, a new recruit. At that moment, the person standing beside Adam noticed him and offered a friendly smile. I didn't know our guild was recruiting. All gazes turned to Adam briefly before they all turned to look straight ahead. While they were curious about the new recruit, they had training ahead of them and wanted to focus on that. My name's Adam. Adam said to the smiling young man. The young man had blonde hair, blue eyes, and a cheerful demeanor. He didn't look older than Adam, and he was most likely a very new recruit as well. I am Enigma. The young man said with a grin. I am still mercenaryman, but I am your senior by 2 months, so treat me with respect. Okay. Adam nodded. In most cases, mercenarymen shouldn't treat others with the same rank with the same respect as higher rankers. However, in this case, Enigma was his senior, and seniority in the guild was also treated with high regard. This might be the first time Enigma was senior to anyone, and since he had been bossed around for months, he finally had the chance to do the same. However, Adam was a S-ranker, and it was enough to completely ignore the seniority. But Adam didn't like to go around declaring it to everyone. Everyone, stand in attention. A brown-haired young man shouted loudly and straightened his back with a serious expression. Every single player did the same, looking like a miniature army. At that moment, the sliding door and bored-looking man entered the dojo. He glanced around the room, unimpressed by the display of discipline. "All right, let's get this over with." He yawned loudly and went to the front of the room, then turned to a bronze-haired young man and nodded. "Young Nahas." "At ease." Nahas shouted and moved from his uptight position to a slightly more relaxed one. However, he still looked like a very serious young man. All the players eased up a bit and turned to look at the instructor. At that moment, the bored-looking instructor saw that there was a new one in the midst. "A new recruit, The guild master didn't tell me about this. Oh well, name yourself." "Adam Palestar." Adam said. "Adam Palestar." The instructor wrote the name down and frowned. "Haven't I heard that name somewhere?" He shrugged his shoulders and said, "My name's Dutch. You may call me Sir Instructor or Sir Dutch, pick your poison." Adam nodded and thought to himself. He is most likely Arch-Warrior. I don't think any weaker should have a position as instructor in Tier 2 guild. "All right, you'll have to choose which one from 3 powers you'll learn," Dutch said, but then he was cut off as the sliding door opened. A frown appeared on his brows. He expected a late student, but instead, a tall figure with fiery red hair entered the dojo. "Guild Master." Dutch immediately stood at attention, his bored expression vanishing like a fleeting cloud. All the players in the room turned to the tall figure and bowed in absolute respect. They rarely had the opportunity to meet the guild master. Nahas, the bronze-haired young man, looked excited. Guild master should have only come here for one reason. He must think one of the recruits shows some promise, and that must be me. Perhaps I'll finally have a chance to be a porter for Crimson Hound's top dungeon party. Dutch. Digby nodded briefly and made a stop at the front of the room. Dutch stepped aside, letting Digby take the lead. "Do you have the scrolls here?" Digby turned to the instructor and asked. "The 3 powers?" Dutch asked, and Digby nodded. Dutch quickly went to fetch 3 old-looking scrolls with worn-out text and quickly returned to Digby before handing them over to him. "Adam, come here." Digby turned to Adam and said. At that moment, all the players realized that Digby came here for this new recruit. It was weird since it was the first time this had happened. Nahas's face morphed into a look of shock and confusion. "He is here for this nobody." "Why?" Adam walked to the front of the room and bowed respectfully. "You'll have a choice to make." Digby crouched on the ground and opened the 3 scrolls. "Craft, magic, or Kiryoku. Choose one to start practicing in." Adam also kneeled on the ground and looked at the 3 ancient-looking scrolls. This was an extremely important choice that would determine his path for the rest of his life. "If you listen to the class, you should know what each of them does," Digby said. "Eventually, you'll start learning all 3 of them, as each one of 3 powers has its own uses. You can't really ignore any of them. However, you must focus on one of them, and this will be the moment to choose the one." "I'll..." Adam hovered his hand over the scrolls, deep in thought. "Choose wisely," Digby instructed. "I'll choose this one." Adam touched one of the scrolls with a confident look. It was a choice he had made a long time ago. After seeing the choice, Digby smiled. "You chose Kiryoku." At that moment, the scroll of Kiryoku started glowing, and a beam of light entered Adam through his forehead. He received knowledge about Kiryoku, and he was now able to learn it. "Kiryoku needs great patience and discipline to master," Digby said and gave the other 2 scrolls to Dutch. "You need to be in control of your emotions and focus your mind completely." "Yes, sir." Adam nodded, and he was almost shaking in excitement. He wanted to already start learning Kiryoku. "Dutch, I'll be taking Adam to the dark room." Digby stood up and said, "I'll train him personally." Gasps. The players gasped and wondered who the hell Adam was for the guild master himself to train him personally. Sir, who is he? Dutch asked with a trembling voice. I have been the instructor for the past 5 years, and this is the first time you have trained someone personally. Who the fuck is he? Nahus looked at Adam with a look of hatred. I was a B-ranked recruit. And I have potential to reach Royal Mercenary and become one of the cornerstones of the Crimson Hound Guild. His name is Adam Palestar. Digby said. Also, he is the newly crowned S-ranker. What? Nahus's face paled, and his jaw dropped. S-ranker? What the fuck? Why did someone like him join Crimson Hound? What in the world? Dutch looked frightened. I have a chance to train S-ranker. Do I even qualify to do so? SSSSSSS ranker. Enigma felt lightheaded and almost fainted. Chapter 76, The Dark Room. Tap, tap. Footsteps sounded. 2 figures waltzed down stone steps into the dark, musky basement. In the basement, there was a heavily chained door. It looked heavy and ominous. It was black in color, with the chains being grey and rusted. Digby flicked a light switch, and a dim light fell over the basement. This is the entrance to the dark room, Digby said as he looked straight at the chained door and pulled out a small key from his inventory. Adam looked at the door and felt a chill run down his back. It was suddenly getting cold. Digby inserted the key into the chains, removed them, and then heavily opened the door. Once the door was open, they saw a dark interior with all light sucked out of existence. Even the light from the basement didn't reach that place. This is a dark room, specially created to learn Kiryoku, Digby said. It will be dark, quiet, and cold there. What do I have to do there? Adam asked like a clueless student. In his past life, he had learned Kiryoku but stopped as soon as he was able to sense the attacking intent of the people. He thought it was enough. To an extent, it was. I'll give you the instructions, Digby said and stepped through the door. Follow me. Adam followed behind, and as soon as he entered the darkness, the heavy doors shut down, trapping both of them in the darkness. He couldn't see anything. However, Digby was able to see clearly, as if he had night vision. After walking further into the dark room, he turned around and instructed. Take 3 steps forward. Adam nodded and took 1 step, then a second, and finally the 3rd step. He was in the middle of the room now. Sit cross-legged and close your eyes. Digby's voice echoed. Adam sat down on the ground, put his legs cross-legged and closed his eyes. Cold. Adam shuddered as he felt cold seep into his bones. However, because of his bronze VR pod, it wasn't an absolutely realistic feeling. He kind of felt cold, but also numb. It was a strange sensation, almost like a distant memory of winter's bite. Digby pulled out a wooden stick from his inventory. It was a strange item to have, but it looked like something he had just picked up from outside in a hurry. The first level of Kiryoku is able to read the attacking intent of people and their emotions, Digby said. It is the first step in mastering Kiryoku. Kuruma was at this step. Adam thought to himself. If he was at the 2nd step, which allowed him to sense the auras of others, I would have most likely lost. The first step is easy to bypass. Just hide the attacking intent. Luckily, it is not that easy to master not now. Fleur Werner, the 2nd general of Star Faction, found a way to learn it easier, allowing almost every mercenary to learn it. However, Fleur hadn't discovered that yet. So, the people who can hide their attacking intents are quite rare. Kiryoku is usually learned through pain, Digby said, and then he started circling Adam, his voice turning into an echo. Learn it with pain. Try to dodge my attacks. Adam entered deep into his consciousness and put all his senses on high alert. His hearing became more acute, but for some odd reason, Digby's footsteps disappeared. I am not allowing you to use any of your senses to locate me, Digby said with a chuckle. To learn Kiryoku, you must abandon your 5 senses. Adam took a deep breath and put his hands on his legs. He wasn't trying to locate Digby anymore. Instead, he started to tap into Kiryoku, like he had done countless times in his previous life. At that moment, a wooden stick smacked Adam on the back of his head, causing him to lose focus. Ah! Adam touched the back of his head with a grim look. I couldn't use my Kiryoku. I was so bad at it because I never practiced enough. Now I need to learn it again. Digby still circled around him. He slightly moved his head, but he didn't use Kiryoku. He felt the air flow around the wooden stick. He has great instincts. This time, Digby changed the grip on the wooden stick. Next time, there won't be any airflow around the wooden stick. He was feeling rather carefree, knowing that he could just throw some sloppy strikes and they would hit Adam. However, he underestimated his fighting instincts. Adam closed his eyes again and took a deep breath. Digby walked a few circles, then he swung the wooden stick and hit Adam in the side of the head. Crack! It sounded like a whip had landed. NGH. Adam touched the side of his head and sighed heavily. Master, I can't sense anything. Kiryoku, is your body finally saying enough? Digby said. Without pain, you will be unable to learn it. You must learn to embrace it, allowing your brain to expand. Kiryoku and its classic nonsense. Adam sighed heavily. Masters of Kiryoku always explain things in such a cryptic way. I am not expecting you to learn Kiryoku today or tomorrow. Digby said. It will take months. However, for now, embrace the pain. Adam closed his eyes and then felt another whip-like attack hit the back of his head. For the next couple of hours, Adam continuously got hit. He got hit 100, 200, perhaps even 300 times. Yet, he wasn't even close to dodging a single attack. After a 3-hour mark, the training came to an end, and Adam limped back to his room, where he laid down on the hard, wooden bed. In the central courtyard. Digby looked at the courtyard fountain, deep in thoughts. Drip, drip. The water droplets splashed softly against the wooden floor, providing a calming rhythm that matched the movements of the leaves rustling gently in the wind. It wasn't raining anymore, and the dark clouds had almost all vanished from the clear afternoon sky. Master. Dutch walked over. He also just finished training his students. Dutch. Digby nodded and asked, how did the class go? Good, good. Dutch replied, but he clearly wanted to ask something as he fidgeted. What is it? Digby sensed his anxiousness and inquired. Sigh, it's impossible to hide our emotions from the master of Kiryoku. Dutch wryly smiled. And asked, how did he do? Adam. Digby asked and saw him nod. As well as you can expect. He couldn't learn the Kiryoku. Oh. Dutch nodded. For a moment, he thought that Adam would be able to learn Kiryoku. After all, S-rankers were known as monsters above monsters. However, he thought it was also foolish of him to think that S-rankers were monsters, yes, but even for a talented individual of A rank, it would take several months to learn Kiryoku. I'll need you to be in charge of his other training. Digby said. Martial arts and weapons training, that's on you. I'll personally teach him Kiryoku. All right, Dutch replied enthusiastically. It wasn't every day you got to train a S-ranker. I'll log out for a bit. Digby said and pulled out his interface. I want tomorrow's training program on my desk before I return, is that clear? Yes, sir. Dutch saluted and watched as their guild master vanished into floating light pixels. Chapter 77, Curse of Love. Real World, Navy Town. Adam sat on the desk, watching some videos on the computer. He was catching up on some news that had happened recently. He had forgotten about some things about him, these things happened over a decade ago. He had also been trying to remember what was going to happen in the following month or two, but couldn't recall anything major. At that moment, his phone vibrated. He checked it out and saw that he had received notification someone had sent $100,000 to his bank account. The sender's name was Digby Chaucer. Whew! Adam sighed out a relief, closed his phone, and browsed the internet until he found the Platinum VR pod currently on sale. It was also in a very reputable online store. Its price was ridiculous. Price, $20,000. A worthy investment. Adam said, and without any hesitation, he purchased the machine, and it would arrive in the next couple of days. I also have enough to pay off the rent and still have some money left. Adam leaned on the chair and let out a contented sigh. I'll delay paying off the rent for a while. They would get very suspicious if I managed to get the money on the first day. He then cracked his knuckles and went to Mortal Online's forums. There, he found more stuff about Red Thread. It was a dangerous place, but he wanted to visit it. I have now money to travel there and purchase some stuff that could come in handy. Adam moved under the desk, pressed the shut-off button on the computer, and then stood up. He then slid his chair under the desk and stretched his arms above his head. At that moment, Adam started hopping, like a boxer, and started throwing jabs at the empty air in front of him. Then, he took a step forward and did a flexible high kick, almost hitting the ceiling with his foot. His leg acted as a whip and made a loud whooshing sound as it sliced through the air. NGH. Adam looked uncomfortable and put his foot back on the floor. My body is not that flexible either. I know what I need to improve upon. He then dropped down to the ground, catching his body with his hands, and then started doing push-ups. It was already getting late, and he didn't sleep at all last night. Still, he didn't feel that tired. On the other side of the wall, Alice sat on her bed with her back against the wall. She listened to the sound of Adam doing push-ups. He has changed. She thought to herself and hugged her legs closer to her chest. He is now taking care of his body, and he seems more confident now. Perhaps he has a crush on someone. She tapped her finger against her lips, deep in thought. It feels like he is moving further away. Alice wondered, feeling a twinge of sadness in her heart. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was slipping away from her. What should I do? New World, the Imperium City. In the heart the Imperium City, where cobblestone streets wind like serpents between towering edifices, the grand cathedral loomed like a sentinel, its spires reaching for the sky. Within the expanse of the nave, rays of moonlight filtered through the clerestory windows, illuminating rows of pews where devout worshippers bowed their heads in prayer. The air was thick with the scent of incense, mingling with the soft strains of hymns sung by a choir hidden in the shadows of the choir lofts. The service was a beautiful display of faith and reverence. At the heart of the grand cathedral stood the altar, adorned with intricate carvings and golden candlesticks, where a woman was sitting, her beautiful back facing the choir, as she prayed silently. Her beautiful, long silver hair cascaded down her back like a shimmering waterfall. She was the embodiment of grace and purity, radiating a sense of peace and tranquility to all who beheld her. She was the Grand Priestess, Lady Yu. She softly opened her eyes, revealing a depth of kindness and compassion that seemed beyond her years. Her golden eyes sparkled beautifully. As she was about to stand up and end today's ceremony, a gentle breeze swept through the altar. It stopped her in her tracks. No one felt it, not even the devout worshippers, as they were still bowing and chanting different prayers under their breath. God Almighty, is it you? Lady Yu whispered in an angelic voice. It's me. A voice came behind her. Lady Yu turned around slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She then saw a pale-faced man wearing a dark cloak and a crown of thorns on his head. Little God. She smiled sweetly and bowed gracefully. Is your curse of men still acting up, little Yu? Little God asked and sat down on the altar, crossing his legs elegantly. It is. Lady Yu replied, her voice tinged with sadness. I think it has even become worse. How come? Little God asked. Before, when men talked to me, I felt sick and weak, as if I wanted to throw up, Lady Yu said with a sigh. It's not because I found them displeasing. Most of them were handsome young men and seemed kind, but this curse of men disallows any contact with men. Now, if I am even stared at, the curse of men activates. It has become so much worse. It is a powerful curse. Little God said. Even a god like me can't do anything about it. Will I be like this forever? Lady Yu asked with a sorrowful tone. That's uncertain, Little God said, crossing his arms. But we have another name for the curse of men. What is it? Lady Yu asked curiously. Curse of love, Little God said. Those with this curse are said to be forever alone, unable to find their love. I am unable to find love. Lady Yu said with a hint of sadness in her voice. I'll be alone. Forever. Not necessarily. Little God said and raised one finger. It has also been said that there is one person in your entire existence who is destined to be your soulmate. The curse of love won't activate in the presence of your soulmate. Soulmate. Lady Yu whispered, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. She rarely felt any desires, but now she couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement at the thought of finally finding her soulmate. Does your curse of love activate when looking at me? Little God asked curiously. Lady Yu, ashamed, nodded her head. I see. Little God nodded. I don't want you to suffer more, so I'll get going, but I came here for another reason than just chit-chat. What is it? Lady Yu looked at him. A person with fragments of my power had appeared. Little God said. The thing is, I don't remember giving fragments of my power to anyone. I can only do it once, and it's a power that cannot be taken back. You think he stole it from you? Lady Yu asked. Very unlikely, Little God said. I just want you to keep an eye on him. You've got your own spies, don't you? I'll send them first thing in the morning. Lady Yu said with a smile. Good girl. Little God started floating in the air, his body slowly vanishing. Don't be discouraged. I have a feeling that your soulmate is closer than you think. Lady Yu nodded with a smile. Chapter 78, Raid. The winds of the winter had passed, and the warmth of spring enveloped the land. In dawn watch, at Crimson Hound's villa, sweat flew as mercenaries sparred and trained tirelessly. Smack, smack, smack. At the corner of the central courtyard, Adam held a wooden sword in one hand, facing a stuffed doll that served as his opponent. He then lunged forward, slashed his training sword across the doll's chest, and repeated the move until the doll was in tatters. Ding, ding. A strange dinging noise echoed in Adam's ears, stopping him in his tracks. Progress, 100%. You've learned basic blade handling. Finally, Adam thought to himself. It took longer than it should have, as I had put most of my effort into learning Kiryoku, which I still hadn't managed to do. Adam looked at the training sword in his hand and started doing simple slashes. Yet, there was something different about the way it felt in his grip today. It felt smoother and more natural. That's much better. Adam's lips curled into a slight smile. He was very pleased. Some newcomers ignore the basics as they are mostly focused on more powerful ones. However, the basics were the foundation of everything, and Adam knew their importance. Now that my swordsmanship has improved, learning new sword skills will be much easier. Everyone, gather indoors. Dutch shouted. Everyone stopped their training and rushed inside. Oh, what's going on? Adam, with curiosity, entered the small dojo and joined others to see what the commotion was about. Dutch stood in front of the students, but he was standing strangely. He looked upright and tense. Usually, he would look bored and even lazy. His back was barely straight but instead curved as if he were having back pain. Now, his whole demeanor was different. The students immediately realized why and also straightened their backs. The sliding door of the dojo opened and Digby, the guild master of Crimson Hounds, entered with a stern expression on his face. Nowadays, he was rarely seen by other students because he was busy overseeing the operations of the guild and teaching Adam the ways of Kiryoku. Nahas and a few others felt very annoyed by that because they felt like Adam had special privileges even though he was only mercenaryman. They, as order givers, thought mercenarymen as less important and undeserving of special treatment. Even though the difference was only one rank, there could be a difference of multiple levels. Even a single level at the lower levels would make an immense difference. At this point, Adam was still level 1, as he hadn't left the compound yet. Digby walked to the front of the dojo and said, "We've received information that the boss of floor 10 has finally respawned." Nahas and a few others immediately looked excited. "Nahas, you'll lead this raid, as usual?" Digby said. "Yes, sir," Nahas said energetically, with a smile creeping up on his face. Floor 10. Adam's mind began running, and then his eyes brightened. Right, that place has a golden opportunity. It took him some time to remember it, but once he did, his heart started beating rapidly. Right, that golden opportunity will be discovered soon from a member of the Richer's Guild. It would happen within a month, so this might be my only chance to get this golden opportunity. I'll have to participate in this raid somehow. He looked past the dozen students and straight at Digby, then he slowly raised his right arm. The few students in his vicinity glanced at him briefly. Digby looked over to him and nodded, allowing him to ask his question. "May I also join the raid?" Adam asked. It didn't matter that he hadn't entered floors 6, 7, 8 or 9 yet. He could even enter floor 50 if he wanted because the door there had already been cleared. Every floor has a door, and once it is opened, everyone else can step through it. At the current moment, humanity has reached floor 73. They had been working hard and tirelessly to clear floors towards the ultimate goal, floor 100. Oh! Digby rubbed his chin thoughtfully and looked at Nahas. "Nahas, you're the raid leader. What do you say?" "Absolutely not!" Nahas firmly shouted. "He doesn't know our tactics and strategy. He would just get in the way." Adam frowned silently. "This, Nahas, has not been very friendly to me. He has some kind of animosity toward me. That's troublesome." Digby mumbled under his breath and said, "Adam, do you think you are ready?" "I am at the bottleneck with Kiryoku," Adam said. "I believe with combat, I can overcome." Is that so?" Digby nodded. "Adam has insane combat talent. His body has started to react by itself, trying to dodge my attacks. It's like his body is already predicting my moves before I even make them. Still, that's not Kiryoku, but it is close. In the past week, I have seen his lack of progress, and it could be because of the bottleneck." It was pretty impressive of Adam to realize his own bottleneck. A proper life and death battle could prove useful to him. "The raid on floor 10 isn't a game," Nahas shouted, his face turning red. "We're about to face a dangerous boss." Digby looked at Adam and asked, "What role would you like to take in the raid?" "Most roles have already been filled, such as damage dealer, healer, and support." "Not tank?" Adam questioned with a slight smile. "We have a tank." Nahas looked to his left and patted the shoulder of his friend, who looked slightly timid. His friend wasn't tall or muscular, he was lean and short. He had a look of uncertainty in his face. It wasn't his choice to be a tank. It was Nahas's because there was no one else for the role. It was also an extremely dangerous role. He didn't want to be a tank, as he had already almost died because of it. It was his duty to keep the bosses busy, and he didn't have the skill set to become one. Digby looked at the young man and slightly shook his head. He could tell that he was one of the forced role takers, as there wasn't anyone else to take the role of tank. At that moment, Adam said, "I can be the tank, if the current tank is fine with it." Nahus scoffed loudly. "Ha, we'll be just fine with our current tank." "Well, are you?" Digby looked at the uncertain-looking young man. The young man felt the sharp glare of his friend, Nahus, but he gulped loudly and lowered his head before whispering, I am fine giving away my role as tank." Nahus gritted his teeth and asked, "What the hell are you doing?" "You were doing just fine." "I don't want to fucking die," the young man shouted back. "This is floor 10 we're talking about, it's vastly more dangerous than floor 9, where I almost died. After the battle, I only had 5 health left." "Are you fine with being a tank?" Digby asked Adam with a worried look. "It is extremely dangerous." "I am confident," Adam said with a smile. "All right then." Digby nodded. "You all will depart in the morning. Prepare for the journey ahead." "Yes, sir." Adam was about to leave the dojo to get his things sorted, but at that moment, he heard a ding in his ears. It was a different sounding ding from his previous one. He had received a message. It was from Sarah. It was possible to send a message from the real world to mortal online with a specific messaging app, which Adam downloaded on Sarah's phone so she could contact him at any moment. After checking out the message, Adam quickly returned to his quarters. Sarah was asking for the rent payment for the following year. "Right, it has already been a month since I came here. I'll get that over with, and then it'll be time for the raid." Adam thought with excitement. He had almost forgotten about the excitement of going to new raids. Even though he had cleared the floor 10 long time ago, it still felt like a fresh experience. Chapter 79, Bloodhound. Swoosh. The glass lid of the beautiful Platinum VR pod slowly opened, revealing the stunning interior filled with state-of-the-art technology and a young man lying inside. MMH. Adam rubbed his eyes and slowly stood back up, then started stretching his limbs as if he had just woken up from a nice nap. He had been using the Platinum VR pod for a while now, and Adam had almost forgotten just how much better it was compared to the Bronze. He had been using Platinum for years before his death, and he had gotten so used to it that he forgot just how bad other VR pods were compared to it. Platinum VR pod enhanced the reality of the virtual world to a level that was unmatched by any other VR pod. It also had the most comfortable seating and the highest quality audio. Also, it kept Adam's real body very healthy. It was even improving his physical fitness level and health. Adam slowly climbed out of the VR pod, shirtless. His body in the past month had become slightly more toned and muscular. It was still far away from his previous body shape, but he was proud of the progress he had made. After putting on a t-shirt, the door to his room swung wide open, and Sarah, with her arms crossed, stomped inside with a smug look. "Well then, I do hope that you have the rent money," Sarah said smugly and looked at the beautiful VR pod. "Or did you spend it all on this?" "Humph, if you don't have the money, we're going to sell it off." She doesn't know the value of the Platinum VR pod, Adam thought to himself with a smile. I gave her a fake price that was actually worth only $500, while it was actually $20,000. If she had known the real price, she would have passed out. Adam took out his phone, entered his banking account, and typed something quickly while Sarah impatiently tapped her foot against the floor. "BRR." Sarah frowned as her phone vibrated in her back pocket. She pulled it out and nonchalantly opened it. She thought she had received a message from either John or Alice or from one of her friends. However, instead, she saw that she had received an email saying that she had received quite a sum of money in her bank account. After seeing the amount, her sharp eyes rounded up in shock. "That should be enough, isn't it?" Adam slowly pocketed his phone. "Our deal's finished, and I can continue playing, right?" How? Sarah looked at him in shock and turned to the VR pod. Should I start playing as well? How in the world did he receive so much money in a month? No wonder he was able to purchase another VR pod, even though they're expensive. His old one should be in the garage, Well? Adam asked with a raised eyebrow. Sarah looked at him intensely, then scoffed and pocketed his phone. Fine, but remember that this money will only cover 1 year worth of rent on your part. Next year, you'll have to pay rent again if you plan to live here. Remember that. I know. Adam nodded, and then Sarah left the room, leaving the door wide open. You should have at least closed the door. Adam mumbled under his breath and closed the door, then went to the window and opened it. Fresh air filled the room. Adam leaned out of the open window, taking in the view of the town and inhaling deeply. He felt a sense of calm wash over him. As he was about to exhale, he heard a strange clicking sound. Click, click. After opening his eyes, he saw a strange figure in the narrow alleyway, just on the other side of the street, holding a camera and pointing it directly at him. The figure looked shady with a black fedora and a long trench coat. He looked like a detective from a classic noir film. Shit! Adam suddenly leaped out of the window recklessly and landed in the backyard, then jumped over the fence and started running towards the dark alley. The shady figure placed his camera in his handbag and entered the dark alley slowly, as if he wasn't in any hurry to escape. Adam entered the dark alley and saw the figure stop and turn around. He had a small mask covering his nose and mouth, but his eyes were piercing and full of malice. Taking photos, what are you, a pervert? Adam said it mockingly. What if I were naked? Now, mind handing me the camera? Haha, the figure chuckled. I have heard that S-rankers are quite arrogant. They have earned the right, but not you yet. His voice is quite deep and sounds very southern. Adam thought to himself. He might be from New Texas or maybe even from Old Texas. I'll need to get his name to know who sent him, I might know it. You followed a stranger in a dark alley. The figure said it maliciously and then grinned. The world is a dangerous place, little pup. I am so scared. Adam said coldly and moved into his boxing stance. Give me that camera, and then you'll tell me your name, forcibly. As I said, arrogant. The figure dropped his bag to the ground and cracked his knuckles. My other occupation is Otherworld Killer, but I suppose my boss doesn't want me to kill you, so I'll only rough you up a bit. Adam moved forward, weaving his upper body while having his 2 arms in a defensive stance. The shady figure lunged forward with surprising speed and agility, and then threw a fast straight punch that connected with Adam's arms. Smack! It was a powerful sounding punch, but Adam managed to block it without showing any sign of pain. Hat! The shady figure formed a fist and started throwing punches at the block. Smack! 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 Adam blocked all the punches without taking a single step back. His expression looked nonchalant, as if his brain hadn't even registered that he was in a fight. At that moment, the shady figure noticed that Adam's knees slightly buckled, and his block was starting to weaken. He immediately rushed in and threw a punch from low. It was a hook punch, aimed at the waist. Now! Adam grabbed the arm while using his other hand to grab the shady figure's collar, and then, using his momentum, he lifted the figure over his shoulder and threw him down to the pavement. Crack! The pavement cracked under the powerful throw. Arg! The shady figure coughed out all the air in his lungs. It was a shocking blow, and he hadn't yet realized that he was down on the ground, breathless and in pain. Adam suddenly formed a fist and slammed it deep into the figure's stomach. Smack! The figure coughed blood all over Adam's face. Be bastard! The figure cried out in pain and suddenly pulled out a knife from his belt and swung it at Adam. Adam quickly backed off, narrowly dodging the sharp knife, and immediately put his hands up in defense. The figure climbed back to his feet, looked at the bag on the ground with a look of regret, and then rushed out of the alley while clutching his stomach in pain. Adam watched as he left and then turned back to the bag. He picked it up and opened it. There was a camera, a wallet, a passport, and some napkins. I could have caught him, but there's no need to risk my life like that. He was here to find my location anyway, and he knows that, so he doesn't really need the camera. He didn't really care that his location would be known. All the mercenaries had their homes known, except a very few that lived in shadows. It was dangerous, of course, as there were other world killers, but for that reason, mercenaries spent a lot of money on security measures. Well, I wonder who that person was. Adam picked up the passport and checked it out. As soon as he saw the face, a certain name popped up. Carmine DeLuca. Adam then checked out the name in the passport, which had a fake one. He didn't care about leaving the passport either because it had a fake name. Carmine had no idea that I would recognize his face. Carmine DeLuca, the bloodhound of the underworld. Chapter 80, Crimson Armor. The following morning, in the yard of Crimson Hound's compound, a group of players had gathered and were waiting for the arrival of the wagon and the driver. Even though the dungeon's entrance was in dawn watch, it would still take around an hour to reach it as the city was still quite large. While everyone wore their own armor with the familiar crimson cloaks flapping behind them, Adam didn't have any armor as he couldn't afford one. Therefore, he was in his usual get-up with a simple leather vest and pants. He had his familiar steel short sword dangling from his belt and a round shield strapped to his back. Seeing his get-up, most of the players on the yard scoffed and mocked him inwardly. It didn't give them a lot of confidence that the tank of their group looked so weak. Sigh, I envy you. At that moment, Enigma came from inside and sat beside Adam. I wish I could join the raid. Oh, you aren't coming? Adam asked with raised eyebrow. Nah, I am too weak, apparently. Enigma sighed wryly. Well, they aren't wrong. I am still trying to learn magic. I am aiming to become a powerful wizard someday. Wizard? Hey. Adam replied, intrigued by Enigma's goal. At that moment, the sound of horses neighing and wagons rolling down the cobblestone road sounded in the distance. The ride is here. Nahs shouted and picked up his backpack. He wore steel-colored armor with a crimson cloak billowing behind him. No time to waste, let's go. Good luck. Enigma cheered Adam on and then returned inside to continue his training. As Adam was about to pick up his backpack, he suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around and, to his surprise, saw Digby looking at him with his deep, red eyes. Guildmaster. Here. Digby took something out of his inventory and placed it on the ground. It was a crimson armor with a similar colored cloak and helm. The helm looked like a dog's head with sharp, pointed ears. It looked menacing and intimidating. What's this? Adam asked with a raised eyebrow. This is for me. That's armor that only fully fledged mercenaries of Crimson Hound receive. You aren't at that level yet, but perhaps this will help you survive through the raid. I expect you to return it to me in prime condition. Adam looked surprised. This was clearly expensive armor. However, he was also grateful and accepted it gratefully. After Digby left, Adam quickly put the armor on, and it perfectly fit his frame. The armor in Mortal Online worked in strange ways. It would perfectly mold to fit the user's body, almost as if it were alive. Now, Adam looked vastly different from his previous scrawny self. The armor made him look dazzling, as if he were a seasoned mercenary. He then put the helm on and closed it over his face, with only his deep eyes peering out from the darkness. Information. Curiously, he wanted to check the armor's stats. Armor of Crimson Hounds. Rank, Azure Rare. Defense, 150. Durability, 100%. Description, an armor specially made to be worn by mercenaries of Crimson Hound. The helm and the Crimson Cloak radiate a menacing aura that has the ability to weaken the morale of enemies and inspire allies. 150 defense, not bad. Adam thought with a smile. This armor can definitely stop most of the ordinary attacks, but I'll have to avoid Chaos Being's special attacks. What's taking so long? Angry-sounding Nuh stomped to the yard after seeing that Adam was nowhere to be seen when they were ready to embark on their journey. At that moment, he saw a crimson-armored person in the yard. At first, he was about to bow. As a sign of respect, as he thought it was a mercenary of their guild, but then Adam opened the helm and revealed his face. "Why you?" Nuh whispered in shock. "Where did you get this armor? You shouldn't be allowed to wear that. Guildmaster gave it to me." Adam took off the helm completely and stored it inside his inventory, as it was quite stuffy to wear. He planned to wear it only during battles. Why are they all treating him differently from the rest of us? Nuh gritted his teeth hatefully. "I am also a genius, so why have I never received this kind of treatment? We should get going, no?" Adam walked past him, left the yard, and entered the first wagon on the right. It was already mostly filled with other members of the raid. After seeing Adam, they looked shocked and envious at the fancy armor. They were aware that some newcomers receive privileged treatment because of their rank in the tutorial. It had never been as blatant as now. S-rankers were truly treated differently, the difference was like day and night. TCH. Nuh clicked his tongue in annoyance, took a seat beside the driver, and then ordered him to start going. The driver humbly nodded and started pulling the reins. He was also a player but a failed mercenary. He failed in the tutorial, but instead of quitting, he became a wagon driver. The hours were long, and sometimes it could put his life in danger. Sometimes, he had to drive days to the neighboring cities to deliver goods and supplies. Sometimes, he was forced to fight off bandits and other wild animals. There were a lot of instances when he died and lost his coins and supplies. However, he always got back on his feet and continued doing his job. The job paid fairly well, and he enjoyed it more than his previous occupation in real life. The hardest part was the treatment he received from mercenaries. They treated him like a second-class citizen, which he was in the new world. At that moment, the horses neighed and started pulling the wagons down the cobblestone streets. During the hour-long journey, they passed down different kinds of streets with buildings of various architectural styles. The city was a mix of old and new, showcasing the stark contrast between tradition and progress. After some time, the wagon pulled to the entrance of a strange building. The building seemed to be connected to the enormous mountain that oversaw Dawnwatch. The entrance of the building was outside the mountain, but over half of the building was embedded into the mountain itself. They all left the wagon, Nuh paid the driver, and then they all entered the building. It was clear that they were part of Crimson Hounds, and some of the mercenaries nodded as a result. After all, they were Tier 2 guild and that garnered respect from weaker guilds. It didn't matter that they were clearly one of the weakest raid squads in the guild, they still garnered some of that respect. As soon as Adam entered the building, he looked up. A small smile creeped up on his face. It was still as beautiful as ever. A spiral of stairs greeted him, going up the mountain like a snake slithering its way to the top. With each spiral, there were doors leading to different floors of the dungeon. Those doors acted as gateways, or more precisely, portals to the dungeon. The doors that were unlocked were hazel-colored, but those at the top of the spiral were a deep shade of crimson. Those were the floors at the top of the dungeon that had yet to be explored. Following Nuh, they walked up the spiral for a short while. It wasn't long, only about 30 steps, until they reached the 10th door on the stairs. It was the door to the 10th floor. Without further ado, Nuh opened it and stepped through, immediately followed by other members of the raid party. 10th floor. Adam smiled and stepped through the door. As soon as he stepped through, the door closed behind him. On top of the door, there was an insignia of a creature with 8, javelin-like legs and creepy, large head with bulging body, like a spider. The insignia was also glowing softly. It meant that the 10th floor's boss was currently alive. It wouldn't glow otherwise.